Welcome to The Sound, KQAL FM's weekly behind-the-scenes look at Midwestern-made music. From writing and recording to distribution and promotion, The Sound is your source for new releases and exclusive interviews from Midwestern artists. Support for The Sound is made possible by a grant from the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. Rolling.
Today on The Sound, we're joined by local artist Trajan Schaub as he presents a few singles from his roster of music. Despite his unique music that can catch anyone's ear, these songs have yet to be found anywhere else. Our audience at KQAL will be the first to hear these songs right here at 89.5 KQAL. Join us as we hear from a local artist and be the first to hear Trajan Schaub on The Sound.
Times if I told you so, you might not have the heart to believe it.
And that was Congruous, one of the 4 songs we have by local artist Trajan Schaub, who's here with us in the studio. How are you doing today, Tran?
Good. Thanks for having me in.
All right. Well, I guess my first question would be, how did you start out in music?
My father was a guitar player, and I have an early memory of going to Dave's guitar shop with him, and he bought a guitar that day, and I remember picking out a particular guitar strap for him, and so first time I played an instrument was probably 6 or 7 years old, but I didn't really start practicing regularly until I was probably 10. And I picked up, well, first guitar, and then drums, and then bass guitar. So those three instruments are my strongest instruments. But then I learned trombone and tuba in middle school and high school, and played a little bit in college as well.
All right, so you've been doing it pretty much your whole life.
Yeah, a good part of it, yeah.
What would you say inspires you to continue pursuing music? What is it about music that really gets to you?
Well, it's just so transformative. It's somebody else. These are somebody else's words, but they said that it's the closest thing to magic that they have in their life. That it really moves them, and I would agree. It just has a lot of power, and in churches you'll hear hymns and whatnot, and you can go all over the world and hear different kinds of music and from each culture and reggae. Here in North America, reggae it's big here. There's a local band, Tug and the Cross. It speaks to the power of it, that you can hear it represented in other cultures, and it recurs time and time again. So it's really powerful, I think.
Well, a little deeper on that, and you're right. Music has a huge impact all over the world. It's some people say it's the one thing that all cultures have that's the same. We all produce our own music. I assume you're interested in music, so you're probably interested in a lot of artists. Are there any artists that you say really that you take inspiration from? Some that are like, yeah, I would love to be like that person.
Yeah, I've changed. My preferences have changed a lot over time. And I think that keeps things interesting, and more power to you if you can absorb and listen to different kinds of genres all the time. It's good to have those exposures. I think a lot of the older stuff from perhaps the 70s. For example, there's one band, America, which a lot of people have heard of. Mostly older folks are probably more familiar with them. But there's one song, Ventura Highway, which is a great song. If you haven't heard it, you should go listen to it. Something about their music is, I think it's reflective of the time in the United States, at least. That must have been a great time to be alive. A lot of their music came right after the Civil Rights Movement. And yeah, I think America, there's a lot of stuff and now in the modern day, with the advent of electronic stuff, people who are crossing genres and making something new out of recognizable artifacts from previous stuff. So I'm really drawing blanks on new artist names here now, but people who are pushing boundaries.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because when I was listening to these 4 songs, they seemed really different from one another, and I could tell there was like, you were taking inspiration from different places with how you portrayed it. Because this first song we listened to, Congruous, is really different compared to the rest of the songs we have on your roster, and our audience will get to hear that.
Yeah, sorry to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
It definitely. I love to experiment, and in the past, like I said, guitar, bass, and drums, those are my strongest instruments, and you can do a lot of things with those instruments. Lots of people have, and we've proven those facts. But I got bored with them eventually, and I thought I would like to make something more electronic, more modern. And that's kind of where that one came from. And the idea of that song, the Congruous, is kind of it was escapism. I make music partly to escape, because it's a great distraction, perhaps, when I should be doing other things. And that song, Congruous, someday maybe I'll do some vocals for it, but trying to imagine a place that's a utopia, always green and always good, where everything makes sense, which that's not exactly the world we live in sometimes, but that's part of the idea behind the song.
Yeah, you answered a lot of questions of mine when I listened to that, because the first thing I noticed was there were no vocals. There was one vocal part, but it was under all the instruments.
Yeah.
And it really jumped out at me, because my first question is, okay, why are there no vocals? What are you trying to share? And you just answered that for me.
And I should mention that Nathan Graff, he lives in Minneapolis. He added some of the synth parts, and he's the one who added the sounds, the vocal sounds there. So
right.
Shout out to him, because he's a great musician, and he does lots of EDM and stuff like that. So I met him through another event, and he added a cool twist to it.
That just answered another question of mine, because that would have been my next thought. Who is Nathan Graff? Because he's listed as featured in this song. Would you consider doing more work with him?
Yeah, I know he's. I think he's a new father recently, at least in the last 2 years. I just met him, and that would have been in maybe it was 2020 already. Yeah, I think it was 2020, and I would totally do more work with him. I know he's busy, and he's gigging his own original stuff at festivals and whatnot. I would totally like to work with him again. I think he's pretty brilliant musically.
All right, well, I guess we can go from the congruence of your first song to the next song, which is Full of Radio. This is Full of Radio, a song by the local artist Trajan Schaub, who's here with us in the studio.
I got a head full of radio, but I ain't got no place to lay it. I need an agent and a business card just to find a place to play it. They are hard times if I told you so. You might not have the heart to believe it. You need someone else you in, someone who holds a lock and key. Well, that's what I have heard tell. You need someone else you in, yeah. I got a handful of jingles, but I ain't got no way to ring them. I need a lawyer and a tax ID just to have the right to sing them. They are hard times if I told you so. You might not have the heart to believe it. You need someone else you in, someone who holds a lock and key. Well, that's what I have heard tell. You need someone else you in, yeah. Head full of radio and a handful of jingles. You need someone else you in, yeah. Head full of radio and a handful of jingles. You need someone else you in.
And that was Full of Radio, one of the songs written by local artist Trajan Schaub, who's here with us in the studio. How are you doing today, Tran?
Good, thanks, Giovanni.
My first question after listening to this is, how does it feel to be on the radio?
Great. It feels good.
I mean, when listening to this song, it seems to tell a story of your struggles, or like your struggles in trying to get like performing or out there and get into the ears of people. Do you want to talk about your experience with that?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, in the song, when you say my struggles with it, and in a way, yes. And it's also, but it's a common thing. It's struggles of a lot of musicians trying to share their music. You can put anything online these days, but there's everybody's trying to be heard these days, frankly. And the song was partially motivated by a conversation I had with a fellow when I was in Washington State in 2021. I was doing a long journey on a bike. So I had a tent, and I lived off of a bike for about 6 or 7 weeks. And we were at a campground there, and I just set up my camp, and I was eating my noodles and lentils and stuff, and I heard through the air a guitar, and it was very good. And I was like, oh man, that sounds great. What is that? And I thought it was, somebody playing music out of a speaker. And then I heard the finger talk of the actual guitar, and it was the folks next to me. So I walked over to them, started chatting with these random folks, and they were from California. The fellow's name was Trevor Jolly, and actually he does sound for film, and one of the biggest films that he worked on was E.T. So he was the one who did the soundtrack for that movie.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was a bit of serendipity. Anyways, so we were talking about music, and I was, and him living in California and working in the industry, and I played. We swap songs and stuff. We swap songs and stuff with the guitar, and he was saying, "Well, I could tell this is a part of your life, and yada yada yada." He said, "Well, you need an agent, That's what you need if you actually want to make it, in terms of if you want to perform for an income." And so the song is definitely about the shared struggle of people who have the goal of trying to make an income as a performer. And it's, especially these days, the bar is getting raised higher and higher with digital recording. Studios in Nashville and wherever else, they're very, very good. Perfection is vocals. Anything you hear on the radio, they're very well done. So to try to get there to that point is, you need help, and you need to learn a lot. So it's definitely part of that. That's kind of the story of the song. Is I was thinking about that, kicking those ideas around in my head, and eventually I came to this song.
And I want to dive into that, because we just listened to Congruence, we listened to Full of Radio, right? Two very different songs. And you mentioned how Congruence was about this like ideal world that you see. And you went into a little bit of detail about that ideal world, but I want to ask, how do you get to your music? Because my question is, do you have the melodies first? Do you have the lyrics first? Because when you listen to Full of Radio, you talk about how it came from a conversation you had, which makes me think, okay, the lyrics probably came first. But then you hear Congruence, the melody and the underlying of the lyrics is there, and you say you may make lyrics for it later. So what is your process in making music?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. It's different for every song, at least. So some of them are more creative and dynamic, in the sense that I don't have any vision at all when I start. So the Congruous song, actually, it started out with just the bass, and when I was creating it, it's kind of like, one way I see it is like if you're doing an ice sculpture, but it's melting as you make it, so you have to keep reforming it, and then you might have one idea that you thought was good, but then you end up taking it out because you thought of something else better, and then you keep adding things or changing things, and eventually it comes into a semblance of a song. And so it's dynamic. And then a song like Full of Radio, I had the lyrics first, and then I had the chords for the guitar, and then the drums were added. The drums and the bass were added afterwards. And actually, Full of Radio, the harmonica in that song was recorded. That was through Fiverr, the service, the freelance service.
Really?
Yeah. So the harmonica was played by a man from Venezuela.
Huh. Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy to think about. So essentially what I guess to describe your song making process, it's you see something, you want to make something out of it, but it's almost as if you're fighting against the clock or fighting against like when it can't be something formed anymore.
Yeah, it's like wearing a pair of goggles, that might sort of influence things, and seeing things through different lenses all the time, and I want things to be perfect. I work hard to make things as I think they should be, but when it comes to recording, it can't always be exactly the way you hear it in your head. The end result is going to be close, but it might be influenced by other steps on the way.
Right. And it's interesting how you say you like to shoot for, you want to shoot for perfection, because you just mentioned Nashville and recording studios today and how they shoot for perfection. And this leads to another question. Now that you have your song, how do you go about recording it?
I did it with that song, Full of Radio, was recorded with a large diaphragm condenser in a bedroom, with a blanket for sound protection, and a lot of care taken to reduce unwanted noise, so kind of meticulously at times. So it was, just a guy in a bedroom with some ideas. And then, of course, the software, the drums that's a loop that was in the Apple Loops library. So I tweaked it, of course, cut it and paste it and EQ and different stuff.
You that's incredible to think about, because normally when you hear artists that come by, they'll say like, okay, I went to this studio or the studio up in Minneapolis, but you yourself said, I did the whole thing in my bedroom. Yeah. That is dedication. And especially for the product that you have. I'm listening to this and I'm thinking, okay, this is, great music. It sounds like something that you would get at a recording studio, right? So I'm blown away when you tell me I made all this in my bedroom with a blanket over my head. It just... That's incredible.
Cool. Thanks. Yeah. I mean, feels good to hear, to other people's ears that it sounds professional, and I see holes in it just because when you make something yourself, where the faults are, at least where you think the faults are. And people with fresh ears, they might hear it and they don't hear it. They don't hear the faults. They see the whole picture, at least.
Right. And that leads to one more question I have. We have 4 singles here by you. Have you considered making an album? Is that a process you want to do? If not, do you prefer singles over albums, or?
Yeah, I would love to do a full album, and I have a bunch of other stuff in the works right now, as well as other songs that I didn't send to you. My main constraint is time and money, really. I would love to be able to work in a proper studio, at least in a space with proper sound treatment, and perhaps pull in some session players. It's time consuming though, and that's the big thing, is that it's one thing to write the song, it's another thing to record it, it's another thing to mix it, it's another thing to master it, it's another thing to distribute it. So all of those things, to do them yourself these days, to people who do it, kudos to them, because it's a lot of work. And
right. Well, why don't we get into your next song? So this is When I Look Back, one of the singles sent to us by Trajan Schaub here at 89.5 KQAL.
I spent all the morning looking at the ocean with Dungeness before me. I left Squim behind. Ooh, when I look back on that old Olympic highway, who knows what you might find? The journey of a lifetime, or maybe a broken man. Ooh, when I look back. Lonnie was a simple man, living out his final days. Didn't have much, but what he had, he wasn't afraid to give. Hadn't seen his lover or his daughters, he said, for more than 20 years. These are the things I remember, and I look back. And I look back. Well, I was heading westward, blazing my own path. Firefly was blooming, and all I had was time. And I look back. The winters, they are long here, he said, but this here place is mine. I planted these trees with my own hands, so this here's where I'll stay. And I look back. Well, Lonnie was a simple man, living out his final days. He didn't have much, but what he had, he wasn't afraid to give. Hadn't seen his lover or his daughters, he said, for more than 20 years. These are the things I remember, when I look back.
And that was When I Look Back, one of the singles sent to us by Trajan Schaub, who's here with us in the studio. How are you doing today, Tran?
Great. Again, thanks, Giovanni.
So this song really jumped out at me because there's a lot of questions I got after listening to it. The first one was, now I'm not entirely sure if I'm hearing the name correctly. It says a man named, is his name Lonnie?
Yeah.
Yeah, who was Lonnie?
So, like I said earlier, I did this trip on a bike. It was 1,500 miles pedaling, and so I was camping and I was staying with different hosts. And one of the guys, this was on the Olympic Peninsula, and I showed up there, and this person was, how do I say this? He lived alone, and he basically left his family left him because he was kind of in a way, I don't want to say a sloth, but he just lived really, really simply. He had running water, but he didn't have a septic system. He had a little bit of land, and there were like a couple people with houses on it, so they'd pay him rent and stuff. He didn't have a regular job. He just had bare minimum expenses, and he was
A humble life.
Yeah, very. And my experience was I was 20, 25, and I was having this grand adventure, and I was pretty ecstatic. And I rolled up and saw this guy who was kind of nearing. He must have been 60 or 70 years old. And just to see the depth of his experience, and I like I said, I pitched a tent outside on his property and stuff. And it was, I don't know, it just really struck me because he was telling me about his family and how he hadn't seen his daughters or his wife in like 20 years. And actually there was a guitar in this old trailer that he had. So this guitar must not have been played in a few years because I picked it up and it was just terribly out of tune and did not play well. So I played this guitar, and the opening guitar part of this song was played there at first on that guitar that was just sitting in this random trailer that had seen far better days. and then I forgot about it and came back to the lick eventually. I recorded it with my cell phone when I was there at the time. So it was kind of a song born out of a real experience.
So, of course, this does beg a question then. When it says, when I look back, is it you looking back or is it Lonnie? Because I can hear both in this song. Like, he's looking back on his life and you're looking back on this experience. And I guess if it is you looking back, when you are looking back, what are you looking back on? What are you taking with you?
Well, good question. That just something that it was really a memorable point for me because I was at a high point. I was traveling by bike, like I said, and I was pretty unattached to real life. And I met this fellow who was kind of in his own way unattached to real life, and it just really was memorable to me because it was kind of speaking to the depth of experiences that we can have. Me as somebody growing up in rural Wisconsin versus this fella over in the Pacific Northwest. And I don't know if he was happy with what he was doing. To some extent, I'm sure he was. But yeah, it's definitely somebody I met who I won't ever forget because he was very kind and he was willing to share, what he did have. And he had hosted, actually, he had a map with pins from, I don't know, 40 or 50 different countries from people who he had hosted through the years. So he was just he was a very quirky guy who made an impact on me at the time.
I gotta say, hearing these stories for a lot of these songs provides a whole new reflection on them that really, like, I appreciated them at the time because they're wonderfully constructed songs and they're great to listen to. But then getting these stories, I gotta say, it has a really deep emotional impact for some of these, especially. And I gotta say, there's so many different emotions in each of these songs that it really makes me excited for what you have next. So that comes to my final question here: what's in the future for you? What can people expect from you whether it be the coming months, days, years? Where do you see yourself?
Well, those are great questions. I can say for sure I've got music that I'm working on, and I'm always kicking ideas around and always looking to work with other people who have passion for music and are creative people themselves. So I played in some bands, then we did gigs in bars and, the common fare kind of stuff around the area. And I've kind of moved away from that in one sense just because it was I wanted to focus more creatively on other stuff. And I just want to see how far music can take me. I've met a lot of great people just purely because of music. And I don't think I can step away from it, even if I wanted to. I'm just kind of sick with it in a way. It's always been a constant in my life, music. And I went to college and, focused on other things for a time. And now I've been blessed to have the free time and people who are supportive of my creative endeavors too, So my main goal is just to see how far it takes me. Keep creating and keep releasing. I do need to get better at with an online presence. I actually don't have much. I just kind of attribute that to I like to create more than I like to distribute, frankly. So I'm going to take it keep doing as long as I can.
All right. Well, this will give me to two more questions. One, there are a few other individuals out there who are really starting out, right? Who have their career in music, or they have music, the same appreciation for music that you have, right? But they're just starting out. And here you are, someone who is about in the same area they are, where there's not a lot of presence, there's not a lot of, reaching out there, but you're just creating something because you have a passion for it. What advice would you give to them?
I would say that you should remain open to new knowledge and other people who you can learn from, and that the passion is one thing, but if your goal is to actually, record and put a whole song together, it's going to take 20 bad songs before you get a good song, because and all kinds of people have this thing where you got to go through a lot of dirt to find the gold, so to just not give up, but also one needs to know when an idea is not a good idea, just to kind of know whether or not your investment in this particular song or idea at the time, does it actually have real value? Because the passion, it can carry you through, but to remain open and keep trying to create and understanding that you're going to make a lot of bad stuff before you make good stuff is definitely part of the experience.
All right, and finally, where can our listeners find you?
Oh, honestly, I don't have a Spotify set up. I don't have a Bandcamp set up. I am going to do that. As of right now, if somebody wanted to contact me, I do have an email set up. It's schaubsoundmatters@gmail.com. That's SCHAUB soundmatters, SOUNDMATTERS. That's at gmail.com. If you want to connect with me, or you could reach me on Facebook as well. My name's spelled Trajan. Last name is Schaub, SCHAUB. Be glad to talk with you there if you have any questions or you wanted to collaborate or something like that.
All right, well, I want to thank you for taking the time to be with us here on The Sound.
Thank you for asking me, and it's a great pleasure.
Coming up, we're going to have one more song from Tran. This is Easier Than Now, here at 89.5 KQAL.
Let's stay up late and talk alone just for a little while. You'll tell me how you spent the day and we'll laugh. It's 1 a.m. and I can tell just by the way you smile. It pulls me in just like nothing else. Easier than now. Can you find me something that's easier than now? Easier than now. Waiting for something that's easier than now. Just one more day, another dime, another dollar short. Seems it's the way that many spend their lives. But you know they pay with a little more than health and wealth. They pay with time, think it's fine while they wait for something easier than now. Waiting for something that's easier than now. Easier than now. Can you find me something that's easier than now? I hope they find it. They might be waiting for what seems like years. I hope they find it. They might be waiting for what seems like years. I hope they find it. They might be waiting for what seems like years. For now.
Thanks again to Trajan Schaub for joining us on this episode of The Sound. To hear more trans music, tune in to 89.5 KQAL. For more deep dives into local and regional albums, tune in to The Sound, Wednesday nights at 6, right here at 89.5 KQAL. I'm Giovanni Bermudez.
Thanks for listening to The Sound. The Sound is produced by KQAL FM on the campus of Winona State University. Visit us online at kqal.org. Theme music for the sound provided by Mike Terrell of Fires of Denmark.